So it is currently 2 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and start, and I'm a bit tempted to do this differently than I normally do it. Normally we open up with the syllabus, and then we go straight in, and then we do a bit of and then I lecture for a little bit on history of computer science. I figure I'll open with the history this time around, and then I'll cover the syllabus to make sure that the important bits are covered when everybody's here, because there are some important bits in this. So, welcome, first off. I am Professor Andrew Rosen. I am the instructor for 1051. I also normally teach data structures, computer science. If you consider this computer science 1, then I also teach computer science 3. I also wear a bunch of different hats, so to speak. I am also the advisor for the 3 different concentrations of data science. I am also the advisor for the accelerated bachelor's, master's in computer science and data science here. Those are 2 separate things, as well as the advisor for the Math CS and Physics CS dual degrees, and the computational data science master's program. So I wear a lot of hats, so I'm very equipped to answer a lot of questions that you may have about requirements and suggestions for courses. I am also kind of unofficially the contact person for our department with regards to Temple University Japan campus. You may, as most of you are freshmen, you may not be aware, but there is a satellite campus located in Tokyo. I was actually there over the summer teaching computer science courses there. So if you're interested in doing that, I'd be happy to talk to you about that at some point. So suffice to say, I'm used to handling a lot of questions from people who have just started. This course is intended for people who are, actually for a wide variety of people. We have freshmen who are coming in and just want to take this course to get a taste of what computer science is like, see if it's right for them. Some people are taking this because they didn't want to take the other class for their major. Some are taking this because the other class is full. Some people are taking this because they are seniors and they want to get a little bit of programming before they graduate and go out into the rest of the world. And some people are just here because it seemed interesting and you can make money programming. So, so that's with, so I make sure that I basically can cater to everybody. And we kind of, I'm not going to say that our curriculum in this class is accelerated. It's not. I just happen to finish it by week 10 consistently, because when it comes to covering the basics, we can cover that fairly quick. We can cover it fairly robustly, and then I can move on to things that are generally useful. And I generally reserve the last month for special topics and a final project. That's nothing to get to get anxious about, by the way. The final project is something where there's definitely an A for effort with regards to that. But there is incentive for you to do a bit more than just the bare minimum. Now, before we start talking about more generally what's in the course, we should probably talk about what is computer science, because you're in a course for computer and information sciences. What in the world does that mean? Because it's often just conflated with programming, and it's a bit complicated. There's this sentence over here that I have pulled up saying, computer science is no more about computers than astronomy is about telescopes, biology about microscopes, chemistry is about beakers and test tubes. Science is not about the tools, it's how we use them and we find out, and what we find out when we do. So the question is, so it's not really studying computers, it's not programming, but that's understandable because your first class is a programming class. So why is computer science, am I saying here computer science is not programming? Programming's a part of it. And it isn't about learning specific software. There's honestly, if you ask a bunch of computer scientists, you're going to all get a bunch of different answers. But one that's not wrong, one that basically everybody kind of agrees on, is that it's the study of algorithms. Computer science is the study of algorithms. So that's what now that, of course, opens up another can of worms. What in the world is an algorithm? But it also touches on, not only that, how can we automate problem solving and what problems can be solved? Computer science has its roots in a couple of different places. There's these sets of problems called Hilbert's problems that came from a mathematician, David Hilbert. There's a lot of them. Some are still unsolved. Some are partially solved, and there's an entire list. And he had one problem, which I'm going to butcher the German, the Entscheidung problem, which is decision problem, which is very influential in computer science because it's all about basically can things just generally be solved. And two computer scientists, Alonzo Church and Alan Turing, they published two papers, each independent paper saying no, there's no general solution to basically solving every problem. And this is one of the kind of roots for computer science. Another root might be, we might consider being goes back to graph theory into 1736. You may have actually seen this problem at some point. It is a very famous problem. It's called the Seven Bridges of Königsberg, where basically there was a game played by children in the city, Königsberg, that basically said, hey, we've got these 4 islands over here. Can we travel across every bridge? Oh, let's see. I believe it was, which path were they trying to solve? Right. Yeah, reaching an island that crosses each of these bridges once and only once. Go over all these bridges once and only once. And Leonhard Euler, he saw this problem and was like, I'm going to do some math and show that this is an unsolvable problem. This is kind of one of the foundational roots of graph theory, one of the big areas of computer science. Because graphs are the studies, graphs, not the XY axis graphs, but the more generalized graphs, are basically defining relationships, and humans are all about relationships. So it's very useful for these days. Another root of computer science, and probably the most famous one, is Ada Lovelace. Augusta Ada King, Countess of Lovelace, was the daughter of Lord Byron, which, if you remember your world literature or English literature, he was very famous for a lot of his writings. He's the name origin of the Byronic hero, which is, but he was rather, let's just say that he was very famous for a lot of reasons, and he was Ada was the only legitimate child. Lord Byron and Lady Byron divorced, and their divorce was so acrimonious that people fought about it well after they died. Both of them died. So anyway, as a result, she got kind of pushed into doing non-English stuff and ended up in the maths. She eventually met a man named Charles Babbage, who had this idea for a machine called this gear machine. It's called this analytical engine, this idea of basically we can do mathematical computations on this machine with gears, and then Babbage is like, well, rather than reading the gears to see what the answer is, let's go ahead and use some paper to print out the answer. Okay, and what she showed is that she basically she looked at another paper on it, translated the notes, added her own notes, made it her own paper by adding those notes. Yeah, set an elaborate set of notes simply called notes. And that's interesting because the 7th one she wrote, that 7th particular note, is the first computer program that we actually have, like first ever written computer program, written for this machine that never got built. But a program's still a program, even if you never actually run it. But she also had this wild idea about computers being able to use not just these numerical calculations, but if you can encode anything as numbers, say letters, you can do operations on just about anything. This was an idea wildly ahead of its time. Unfortunately, she died well into her 30s. I believe it was died at age 36 in 1852. She died exceptionally early in her life, and unfortunately, their ideas never came to fruition until about 100 years later. Another kind of starting point for computer science and probably the most famous, if Ada isn't the most famous, then this would be. It would be Alan Turing, and specifically his efforts with the German Enigma decryption. So, as it puts out, mathematician, computer scientist, logician, and cryptanalyst, which means that basically he broke codes. For those of you unaware, during World War II, there was a huge intelligence effort dedicated to breaking enemy ciphers, because if you could gain intelligence on what the enemy was doing, you could miraculously have all your troops always be lucky and never get spotted by the scouts. Or even better, your enemy's supply ships could always just happen to find that they are getting shot down by enemy subs. Of course, that gets into a whole game theory thing about you want to make sure that you're shooting your enemy's subs down at a rate that's statistically significant, but not so statistically significant as that would tip the enemy off to the fact that you broke their codes. Alan Turing was one of the people at Bletchley Park leading this effort to decrypt the German Enigma code. By all accounts, his efforts to shortened World War II by approximately 2 years in the German front. 2 years are taken off of war by just simply intelligence analysis. Alan Turing, however, he also he's considered to be a father of theoretical computer science. His name came up earlier. He published papers on basically foundational computer science, defining mathematically what a computer can do, but also creating these questions about AI. He's the namesake of the Turing test, which is a test to basically, which is an interesting test about whether or not people can detect something as human and whether or not that matters. But also, he died very early. He was outed as a homosexual in a time when it was not okay to be gay, and he was given 2 choices. Imprisonment or chemical castration. He chose the latter and eventually committed suicide. The government of Great Britain eventually apologized for his death in recent years, but also another early death in computer science, unfortunately. So those are kind of the foundations of computer science. So there is one other figure, though, that's worth mentioning, one that doesn't get mentioned because it goes back to that name, that word, algorithm, which comes from the Latinized name of Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, which I also probably butchered. Latinized, that's algorithmy. That's where we get that from. He wrote a textbook in 820. A textbook called the Concise Book of Calculation by Reduction. And that book's first word was algebaire, meaning reduction. This is the guy who literally invented algebra. Because this textbook was on, it was on these newfangled base 10 numbers that had come out of the Indian continent that he figured out were way more efficient to do than other number systems at the time. So he basically wrote a textbook on how to use these number systems, got translated into Latin into 1100, and the word algorithm comes after him. Computer science is a study of algorithms. What is an algorithm? Algorithms are a set of well-ordered, unambiguous operations that yield some result in a finite amount of time. That is a lot to take. That's a very dense sentence, so let's break it down. Well-ordered. That means that things in an algorithm have an order, meaning that you're going to do step one before you do step 2. Your instructions aren't going to vary there. They're unambiguous, meaning that there's no confusion about how these things get interpreted. I'm sure we've all been given ambiguous instructions, and we know they're the worst. Operations, meaning that if we do something, it yields us some result, meaning it does something and gives something. It doesn't just waste our time. It actually does something and outputs something in a finite amount of time, meaning it's not going to take forever. It's actually going to output something, and it will output it before the heat death of the universe, preferably. So an example of an algorithm that you might be familiar with, recipes. Recipes are algorithms. Some of them are a bit more ambiguous than others, but I mean, there's a certain well-defined number of operations. You have ingredients that you mix together, and you do them in an unambiguous, and a lot of them have unambiguous meanings. Some of them aren't that great. Some of them do have ambiguity, but it's a great example. So what can you do with computer science? So basically, what does a CS degree do for you? It demonstrates that you know how to program and you can design solutions to problems. It is a degree in problem solving, I like to say. It's not just software development, and since a lot of you are not computer science majors or IST majors or data science majors, it's worth pointing out what kind of interdisciplinary things there are. Biology, chemistry, and medicine. Cross-section with computer science is bioinformatics. It's huge. It will never stop being huge. Using computers to figure out how proteins interact with different things in the body. Figuring out new drugs, new HIV inhibitors, cancer detection. Those kind of things are important. Another one, though, that doesn't necessarily get a lot of mention in these days, but is definitely not boring, prosthetics. Something that is mechanized prosthetics. Physics and astronomy. Quantum computing is kind of that cross area there. That's an exciting field. In terms of astronomy, most supernovas are detected using visual processes these days, as opposed to the human eye. There's tons of astronomy data taken every day, and it's got to be processed in somehow. Cross-section it with engineering, your particular engineering thing. Business and economics. There's a lot of team management that goes into being able to organize computer science and the software development thing. And of course, if you're talking about just raw money, there's a reason they're called high-speed trading algorithms for a reason. Most of those tradings these days on Wall Street, the ones are done by bots. In fact, there have been a few flash crashes back before they were fully regulated in terms of how they operate, because they're very effective at what they do. If you are interested in psychology, there's an entire cross-section of computer science and psychology. How do humans use computers? How can computers aid humans? Human-computer interaction. HCI is the acronym for it. It is a great field. It is where I got interested in research. Particularly, I started out by helping a lab do user interfaces and acoustical maps. I was more in the education side of things, trying to figure out how to create interfaces for children to learn mathematics if they're visually impaired. But there is a lot of things that go on. What color should you make your screens? Where should you put those taskbars? What's optimal there? Where should things be placed? How is that menu useful? How do you test these things on humans anyway? Direct kind of things, as I mentioned, with computer science, software engineering, networking. Everything's interconnected. Data analysis, that's a big one these days. Machine learning, AI, analyzing data or processing huge amounts of data in some way, shape, or form. And of course, security. Although security ties in very interestingly in psychology, because of course, there's a lot of these exploits are because humans are human. A lot of the big nasty exploits and the hacks that happen are not because somebody's a master hacker slamming on his keyboard. Most of them are going, "Hi, I'm the county password inspector. Can you please tell me what your password is so I can make sure it's good?" It's really just kind of soft attacks and that kind of stuff. But figuring out security, but security also has, it's not just playing defense. There are a number of people who are hired to try to do penetration testing, as it's called, pen testing, where basically you're hired by a company to try to get in and see what damage you can actually do or what data you can exfiltrate. So it's a lot of fun with regards to that, because it becomes kind of gamey. So there's a lot that goes into computer science. Again, it has a very long kind of field, and it's not just one thing. I don't envision it as one thing, but rather something that's grown out of a lot of different, seeds that have been planted over the years. All right, but you didn't really come here to learn history, as interesting as I think it is. So let's talk about our class specifically. So this is a bit of the boring part, but is also part of how I discuss how this class is going to work. So first off, I am recording this lecture. I plan on putting all of my lectures online. I have basically since 2016 put all my lectures online in some way, shape, or form. Back in 2018, I started using YouTube. I don't like YouTube. On the one hand, it has ads, which I don't like. So just install an ad blocker. Seriously, your quality of life goes up when you install an ad blocker on your web browser. But the reason I use YouTube is I don't monetize anything on my channel. Seriously, I don't need your likes. I don't need your subscribes. I don't want them. Don't care. The reason I put it on YouTube is because basically every single device on Earth can easily access it on YouTube. There's literally no possible errors that go on when you're trying to use YouTube. And if you can't access my videos, well, you can't access a lot of the internet in that case. So that's kind of the reason why I use YouTube. If you need to find my lecture recordings at any point, right, just go. There's two places you can find it. The first is right over here in the middle. It says lecture recordings. It's not necessarily the easiest to spot, I found out, but honestly, it's just the way it is. It'll pop that up. And then over here under other important links, over here it has a link to my YouTube channel where you can find it. I'll create a playlist specifically for this class. In the meantime, let's see, come on. That should load up. Yep, there we go. So all of these aren't single videos. They're actually embedded playlists. So you click on the top right over here, and you'll find an entire list of them. You can also click over, here, and that will pop it up on YouTube. So in a separate window. But these are lectures. But the recordings I found are extremely useful for students who miss because they're sick. I used to simulcast these over Zoom, but honestly, that's a lot of headache, and now everything's back in person. So if you can't make it to lecture because you're feeling sick, or you're feeling sick and aren't sure if you should show up, don't show up. Please stay. I'd rather you stay home and not get other people sick. And you can catch up on the lecture later. It's really, I mean it. There's also all the previous semesters where I've done this. So you've got a wealth of resources there. So yeah, the lecture. By the way, the same thing applies to exams. If you're feeling sick, email me about it. Don't come to an exam while sick. An exam is supposed to be an accurate representation of an accurate assessment of your skills. I cannot accurately assess your skills if you are sick. All right, we will find some time to schedule it, although it will need to be sooner rather than later, So, all right, with that regards, the syllabus. Okay, I believe I've completely updated it. If there's a reference to group exams, please ignore that. That was something experimental I tried a couple semesters ago. It went fine. The students enjoyed it, but it was also just way too much overhead in terms of grading and things. So, all right, first off, I tried to do this as a flipped class, meaning aside from this lecture, pretty much I expect you to try to do a lot of the first contact exercises yourself. You'll watch lectures, read material each week before coming to the lecture sessions for practical examples. This is a 4-hour class, which means 9 to 12 hours expected outside of classes. It's multiplied by 3 or 4. So the labs will be held in person unless otherwise specified. The labs are running the first week. If you've missed your lab, just let me know and I'll try to catch you up on it. But the first lab is fairly simple. It's just making sure we can install Python on your computer. If you missed your lab, do your best to catch up on that stuff that you missed. The videos on how to install Python and how to do Lab 1 are right there. If you get stuck, please reach out to me as soon as possible. Don't be embarrassed about it because it is my job to try to get you caught up. If you don't want to fall behind in these first 2 weeks, trust me. There's a bunch of links, Zoom links, a Discord link, and lecture recordings. So first off, if I'm sick and I need to hold it over Zoom, I will. or if my kid is sick and basically there's nobody to take care of him, I'm going to stay home and do it over Zoom, you know? So let's keep that in mind. So if and I will let you know well in advance, you know, I'll let you know you know, the morning of if I need to stay home and hold it over Zoom. I have to do that maybe once a semester about. Okay. Discord. So I use Discord. A lot of students that I found, you know, they coordinate with other students to kind of set up and coordinate and create study groups. But people who join later, they kind of get left out of that. Or if you're shy and don't know how to, and don't, you know, a bit shy about making friends. So I facilitate this by creating a Discord. It is the same Discord channel I have for every class. There's a channel. Think of it as a giant chat room. There's a specific chat for each course I do have. I will answer your questions over on Discord as well, and also some of your fellow students or students from previous semesters might also answer those questions. So it's a useful way to get quick answers and to message me. It serves a lot of purposes. I only ask that if you do join Discord, make sure that your username is set to something, you know, not terrible. So now into the important bits for the big mechanics of the class, which I'll go over in more detail, but to summarize, doing your homework here is a two-part process, submitting and demoing. I'll go over what a homework is in a bit, but it's a two-part process. You got to submit it, which means uploading the appropriate files to Canvas. This shows that you turned it in at this specific time. That way, if there's a late penalty, we can apply that. It's very lenient, by the way. And then to actually get your grade, you have to demo it, meaning you have to show your TA or during lab or office hours, or show me during my office hours. In other words, show me that it runs, show me that it works, and answer maybe one or two questions. You got to be able to explain your code. Especially in an era of ChatGPT, it's very important that you do know what you're doing. So on the flip side of that, this is one of the only ways to auto-fail this course, which is uttering some variation of the phrase, "I did not know we needed to demo our assignments to receive credit." After the first exam, that will be automatic grounds for a 0, because every lab's going to have somebody mentioning demoing labs. Every lecture, I'll be mentioning about demoing labs. That means you just weren't there, and you haven't been paying attention. And I always get some student who tries to demo everything at the end of the semester. It never goes well. That student always fails because there's a lot of bugs in those problems that never got resolved. That's part of the reason we do demos, because if there's a misinterpretation or a unresolved bug, we can address that. We can tell you to go back and fix it. Computer science, a lot of stuff either works or it doesn't, so we want to make sure it does work. We do give you the chance to go back and fix stuff it's not working. All right. Next, our textbook. Our textbook's free. I went through a lot of effort to make sure that I found a resource that works, that's good for the students, that teaches what I want to do, and most importantly, the students will actually use and get, because you're not going to spend money on textbooks if you don't have to. I know. I've been there. I've been the student. So what you want to do is you'll want to sign up for your textbook at runestone.academy. You want to create an account, and you'll register for, and once you've registered, you created your account, like I have, you'll want to, let's see, back to textbook. Can I get back to, here we go. Change course. Let's see, let's see. They changed the way it looks now, but there is a way to register. What you'll want to do, it will give you an option to register for a course. Once you do so, you'll just want to type in the following code for our course: Fall 2023 Rosen. This lets me know that you're in my class, and that way it gets you the textbook exercises sent to you. When you sign up, please use your TU email as your sign-up email, and use your exact name as displayed on Canvas as your name. These are two of the fail-safes I have in there, because what happens is that this is completely disconnected from Canvas. So what I have to do during the semester is I have to run a script, a Python script actually, that I wrote that merges two spreadsheets together. And the way it identifies person A on sheet 1 and person B on sheet 1 is that it looks either for your email addresses to match, or which is the TU email, or it looks for your first and last name, or your first, middle initial, and last name. And if it doesn't do that, it doesn't get imported. And if you follow that, this minimizes the number of people I have to do manually. All right. When signing up for office hours, ensure you sign up with the person you want. So first off, we have a bunch of office hours, and I make it easy to sign up for office hours. Most of our office hours are on Zoom, although I hold office hours before class, and you're more than welcome to drop in to sign up and drop in then. The reason I have signups is because if we're doing this over Zoom, it's very taxing to have the Zoom window open all the time and nobody shows up. So we have these slots open. If none of these slots work for you, then of course, just send me an email and we'll schedule a time outside of. These are just simply slots I have predetermined that are available. So the way you do this is you just scroll down to the bottom of the page, or you click on the office hours link to any of us. It brings you to the same page. It's all the same. Okay, and then you click this to reserve a time. Select 1051 and select which TA you want. You can use any TA you want. It doesn't have to be your section's TA or anyone, and just select an appropriate time. Okay? The reason we do this is, again, I found this is very easy. It sends you a notification. It'll also send you a reminder an hour before. So it's just the way, and it also lets you know what the TA office hours are as well. Okay. Okay. Don't cheat, please. Seriously, don't. I'm actually really. How do I put this? Pattern recognition is a subdomain of computer science. Computer science has a higher rate of plagiarism than other disciplines. Or rather, I should say, computer science has a higher detected rate of plagiarism. Because again, pattern recognition is a subdomain of computer science. It is not unreasonable for this next class or the class after that to assign a plagiarism detector bot as a homework for you to build. That is how easy it is. So I'm very good at this point. I don't know how good I am with ChatGPT these days, but I will tell you one thing. They're not good at turtles, and a lot of our examples use turtles. You'll understand what that means in a bit. So don't cheat. It will really come back to bite you on the exams. It will, and again, I'm keeping a running tally here. 53 charges since fall 2021. That's how many students I've charged and who have been formally charged and have had sanctions applied to them. So please don't cheat. I also don't just simply throw students under a bus. I will not bring charges unless I'm 100% sure I can convince the other professors 100% that you cheated. And that's only ever gotten one student off of being brought up before charges on that. So please don't cheat. Seriously, if you feel like you're too far behind, reach out to me. If you feel like you're struggling and the due date's in 2 hours, reach out to me. Please, I will figure out something with you. I want you to learn. I want you to succeed. Okay? So, again, I talked about what this course was earlier. It's an introduction here. You found it. And I don't know why they have me put it in the syllabus, the times and places and everything, because you found it. It's in your schedule. Prerequisites. Why do you need to know what the prerequisites are? You registered for it. Technology requirements. We recommend a laptop. We highly recommend a laptop for this class. In fact, you'll want to probably bring one. If you don't have a laptop, Make friends with somebody in this course who does, because I highly encourage pair programming. That's perfectly acceptable. If you're using a Chromebook or something like that, there are solutions for that. Don't worry, we'll figure it out. We can either install Linux on your computer, which is very easy on a Chromebook, or we can just simply, or you can make use of the fact that Runestone, our textbook, has a Python interpreter built into the web page. It's really good. But do not use a laptop that is painful for you to use. Do not use something that takes minutes to boot up to get to the programming. You will suffer, and I wrote this out, physically, emotionally, mentally, and academically. Suffering. Okay? Wailing and please reread that last point about suffering. It is torment, lamentations, gnashing of teeth, whatever kind of biblical terms you want to use. It is not fun when your tools are bad, you're not going to have a good time. So there are limited resources available. There are computers you can check out. If you have a specific budget, let me know what that budget is so I can help you find something. Trust me, I'm willing to work with you on that, okay? This stuff was stuff that's left over from COVID, okay? Resources in the textbook, right. I told you about the Runestone. We'll go into that in a bit. But also, if you need additional references, such as you need to print something out to use, something that's not fully electronic, Al Zweigart's Automate the Boring Stuff Using Python, that's a great resource. It's available for free on his website, or you can buy a book for $30 if you want an actual physical book that goes over Python. It's very good stuff. It's $30, not that expensive for an actual physical copy, and again, it's free. We will be using that book slightly for one chapter. You don't have to have the book for that chapter, but I use it as a reference for regular expressions when I go over that. And that part is like an optional part on the course. It's like an optional the way I do my final exam is that I give a series of questions and you choose which number you want to attempt. Like I give 7 and you choose 5. Okay. There's also a similar thing over here. Think Python, how to think like a computer scientist. Again, similar. Electronic textbook is free. If you want to publish, if you want paper, you got to pay, well, the cost of the paper essentially. Okay. And of course, Python itself has its own tutorials. Okay. Okay. If you need to see me in person, my room is CERC. Science education. I can't remember what it is. It's just CERC. Research. Look, I'm CERC 349. You'll be able to find it if you plug it in. Okay. Attendance is expected here because if you're not here, you're not going to learn. Labs, they're useful for you. I'll explain the roles of labs in a bit. They'll cover it will cover more than what's present in the textbook, and there's a strong correlation between lecture attendance and passing the class. I'm also prone to mentioning what's going to be on the exam, up to and including exact questions that'll be on the exam for people who are here. So if you're ill, again, don't come to class. Mental health, though, if you experience stress, worry, significant changes in mood, problems eating or sleeping this semester, whether because of my course or because of other courses or other factors, please reach out to me. If you are having trouble, having trouble engaging your brain in this course because things because things are troublesome, please reach out to me. I can listen and help and I can make accommodations, but I can also help you get in contact with the appropriate support structures on campus. I can figure out, what do you need to do in order to get an incomplete? I can figure out, okay, are these appropriate alternate turn-in dates for this? If there's something major going on that's affecting your life. The time to reach out is when you start having these struggles, as hard as that is. I can work with deadlines and other accommodations earlier in the semester, but if you wait until the last week of class to tell me, there's not that much I can do at that point, because there's just no resources for me there's not going to be resources for me in place or available. There's not tools I have at my disposal. The earlier you contact me, the more tools I have at my disposal to help you. If you have if you have a need of accommodation, such as extended time, a note taker, please let DRS know, and then I will work with DRS to accommodate any reasonable accommodations. I have yet to find an accommodation that is unreasonable. Again, recordings. All right, so let's get back in. So what is the course actually made up of? What is your grade made up of? So it's as follows. Solo exercises, 10 points, and classroom exercises. Those are 5 points. I classify these together because these are what I call soft due dates. Well, they have due dates, and these are expectations as to when you're going to have them done. But as long as you get them done before the end of the semester, you'll get full credit. They're soft due dates, very soft. As long as you get them done before the end of the semester, you'll get full credit for them. So if you fall a bit behind, that's okay. But it's worth doing. It's basically free 15 points, you know? So what are solo exercises? They're readings and exercises assigned in the textbook. They're fairly short, they're targeted, they're intended to be done. You are more than welcome to coordinate with others on these things, to work together, to submit the same answers on these things. These are meant to be, short, easy, self-checks. Or not necessarily easy, but not overly challenging, okay? If you're spending more than 15 minutes on a particular problem, please, take a break, reach out to me, okay? Again, the solo exercises are soft. Complete them by the due date. You need to complete them by the due date to stay on track and to stay up to date on the class for the material. But there's no late penalty for them. Make sense to everybody? Okay, same with the classroom exercises. These are what we're going to be doing as part of our active learning in the classroom starting basically Thursday. They make up about 5% of the grade. If you can't do it in class, look at the recording and follow along at home afterwards. They are the primary focus of the lecture. They are intended to be completely done by the end of the lecture. Most of the answer, if not the entirety of the answer, will be available and revealed in the lecture. And you can work with your classmates and turn in the exact same code as your classmate, so long as you just all put your name on it. Okay. Again, same kind of deal with the due dates. Lab assignments. This is most analogous to your homeworks in other classes. Expect one a week. Your TAs are the primary point of contact for these. Basically, you'll get one a week. They're intended to be started in or substantially worked on in the lab period, or you can work on it beforehand and finish it up in the lab period. These are the things that need to be demoed when I talk about demoing. This specifically, the lab assignments are what I need to be demoed. They are supervised by the professor or the instructor or the TA for introduction. Getting help from fellow students is encouraged, but as I'll explain, please don't turn in the same answers. Okay, I have a very robust, I know that might be confusing compared to what I said, but I do have a very robust kind of definition of academic honesty that we'll get into. I found it's very helpful. Your code must work and be demoed and explained, demonstrated and explained, demoed to receive credit for your lab. The due dates for your lab assignments are firm. They have there's a late assignment. Those late assignments will be accepted with a late penalty of 5 points per day. So think about it. It's not that much of a penalty. 5 points per day. Maximum penalty of half credit. Okay? And that credit is determined by when you turn it in, when you upload it to Canvas, not when you demo it. You have 2 weeks until after the due date to demo your lab. Otherwise, we'll enter a 0, but we can waive that. Now, the reason I have this particular phrasing in my syllabus is so that I even have a footnote for it, is that I used to have a large number of students who would wait until the end of the course to demo everything because they didn't say there was a limit to that. So there you go. Don't wait till the end of the course. I'll say no. Don't wait till the end of the course to demo everything. Again, these lab assignments will basically, they'll continue. I think there's a grand total of 8 that will span 10 weeks total. After that, during your last month of classes here, No more homework, it's just your final project. Okay, so you'll have like so again, there's no excuse to wait to the end of the semester. So again, turn it in, demo it. That's how you get it. So the final project, which is worth 10% of your grade, is the climax of this course. Because once we get to a certain point, there's a lot of branches we can take. There's a lot of you here who are interested in developing video games. I love video games. I particularly have a love of small independent projects and student video game projects because student projects allow a level of self-expression you don't get to see in commercial games or even independent game studios make. So there's a lot of love and passion that go into those kind of things. This is an opportunity if you want to learn how to use Unity or Unreal to take that opportunity. If you want to learn something else, like Godot, learn it. If you're interested in video games, take this opportunity to learn about video games. If you are a senior who has a final project in another class, but you feel like you can incorporate computer science into it, please reach out to both me and your other professor. As long as both of us are on board, I'm okay with you double dipping there. If sometimes some students have used this as an opportunity to learn about machine learning. Some students have used this as a way to learn about how to make automated web pages or how to make websites themselves. There's a ton of things. I'll be going over this more as we get closer with more examples of what to do. If you feel yourself overwhelmed with choices, nobody's going to be lacking in imagination, but it is possible to get overwhelmed by choices. Then I have a number of concrete projects that have step-by-step instructions on how to complete them, and all I ask is you add your own little flair onto it. It's very easy to get an A in that course. It is an A for it is definitely an A for effort, and by A I mean a 90. Okay, so as long as you've showed me that you made an earnest effort and you learned something, if it's something that made me laugh or impressed me, you're an A. There's an entire rule there. You're allowed to work in groups. Again, I'll go in more detail about this. However, the incentive to do more than the bare minimum here, or to do just enough effort to get an A, or the bare minimum to get a C, right? The incentive there is that the best projects in each section get to be exempted from the final exam. So best projects don't have to take the final. Okay? And those projects are allowed to be, you're allowed to do these in groups of 1, 2, or 3. It's your choice if you want to work with other people. Okay? We'll go into the breakdown of this later. The due date for the final project is hard. There are no extensions to this. You turn it in on the due date. It's not altered for any student without prior approval, without prior accommodation, or a sudden and documented emergency. In other words, I'll be reasonable about it, but it is hard. I'm not really budging unless you've been in a car accident, or there's something, or things have taken, or things outside of our control have intervened. Okay. Otherwise, the late penalty for this is 1% per minute late. 0.1%, a tenth of a percent per minute late. You turn in an hour late, 6 points off. Okay. Having said that, don't be intimidated. It's not meant to be a startup. You're meant to be. I'm far more interested in the journey. If you set out and try, and it's like I tried to get to point E, I did A, B, C, but D, oh boy, D was really a lot of trouble. Great. Let me know why that was a lot of trouble. You made it's okay to fail to complete everything as long as you made an earnest effort. Okay. So again, I'll talk about that. Again, please turn in. If you haven't finished your work by that due date, just turn in what you have. Okay. I will not accept late work. Okay. Every time I've done it, it's ended. Every time I've done it, that late work turned into a 0 because of plagiarism. Every single time. Okay. I want to do Hangman as my final project. This is a very common request. Hangman is a basic assignment. This is not the scope appropriate for a final project. Now, a game of Hangman that cheats in the background so that the player never actually wins and remains undetected that's cheating. Now that's interesting. And I know how to build that. In fact, it's an assignment I give in data structures. So what we'll do is that I will have a day called Proposal Day, where this is going to be one of the days where it is done over Zoom. Because otherwise, it just doesn't work out. What we'll do is that I will take the time to listen to every single one of your proposals. Those of you who don't have anything to do after that, who aren't in a hurry to get out or don't have anything like after that class period, I'll ask that you wait to be seen last, whereas the people who have class immediately after this or have places to be, please be seen first. That way I can make sure I see everybody, because it does take longer than the allotted time. But I do need to meet with you to make sure that your proposal is sound. Most of them are, or to give you advice on which, okay, I want to do A versus B, which is more appropriate. So that's what we want. So that's what we want to do. All right, exams. Again, hard due dates for the exams. They're timed assessments of your mastery of material. You all are familiar with what an exam is. We do 2 of them and a final. So we have to do 2 midterms and a final. I used to do 3 in this class. Honestly, 2 seems to work well. If need be, after the first exams, when I find that there's were a lot poor performance on the exam, I might do some smaller quizzes in the labs to try to make up points. But that will be something you're going to be well informed about it in advance, right? So they're assessments of the mastery of your material. I'll give more details as to when and how these will be proctored, but they will most likely be done in lecture. But if I find it reasonable to do it during lab, we can do it during lab. Again, it all depends. I've got to coordinate it. It will most likely be during week 6. This is week 1, so most likely during week 6, and then most likely again during week 10 or 11. So that's generally the way it just kind of works out. Again, if you're sick, don't show up, right? But again, I'm not going to, unless you have like a prior approval, accommodation, or documented event or emergency. Like, for example, here's an example of a non-emergency, letting me know that your sister's getting married, on that day, and you've got to be at the wedding. As long as you let me know, like, a couple weeks in advance. I mean, hopefully your sister's letting you know she's being married a couple weeks in advance. That's hopefully. But, that's not a problem. I can arrange for you to take it early or when you get back. That's not real. I try to be reasonable about these things. Okay? But otherwise, just, again, the exam is scheduled for that day. Final exam, there's the registrar website. Let's see, I think this will probably bring up, yep. We can find it. I generally find the final exam at the same time. It tells me to list it. I don't list the final exam time in my syllabus. It's an extra point of failure, because one time I've accidentally copied the wrong time, so I just don't do it anymore because that seems silly. I find out the final exam time the same way you do. Temple final exam schedule. That is how I find it out. They don't send it to me. They expect me to go look it up. So here we go. Fall final exam schedule for 20. So the only thing that students find confusing is that, yes, I've just mentioned this is a 4-week course. But if you look under the, 4-credit courses, not 4-week, but 4-hour courses. But if you look under the 4 hours, we're not listed under there. We're listed under the 3 credit hours. That's because we're 3 lecture hours and 1 lab hour. That's how it's rated. So we look under here, look at 2 to 3. So we are on 12:19 for our exam. Okay? So that seems fairly late. That's usually what happens. I find that the biggest contributor to poor scores at that point is just simply fatigue, okay, of taking exams. Okay? So one thing to know is that since a lot of you are first semester freshmen, these things are set in stone. So instructors are not allowed to alter their times of their final exams to be during different times or or whatnot. They have to get their final exams during this time. That way it doesn't conflict with other final exams. Now you're allowed to, now you're expected to possibly need to take multiple exams in one day. But here's the bit that's important for students to know. If you have more than 2 exams in one day, no. One of the instructors needs to move their time at that point, okay? It's your right as a student to not have to take more than two in one day, okay? So I have students who sometimes think they have to do 3 in one day. You don't have to do 3 in one day. Please don't. Again, accurate assessment. I can get an accurate assessment if you're doing 2 exams, not if you're doing 3. So let's see. Is it listed under commons? No, it is not. So we're good. All right. So total weight for that is, so yeah. Finally, not all points are equal. On Canvas, you'll see that something is rated X points. Those points get totaled up for that category, right? So an assignment point's not the same as an exam point in terms of like 1 point is not equal to 1 point. Those points don't translate. So overall, 10, 5, quarter of your grade is those lab assignments. 15% is effectively free, and then it's not hard to get 9 out of 10 points on this. Okay, half your grade is approximately half your grade will be exams. So, but again, that's kind of unfortunately necessary these days. I don't like having big assessments, but also there's 210 of you, and so I can't give very frequent assessments because that just becomes untenable. I've tried it. You don't get your feedback nearly as quickly as you need to. Now, curving for the class generally works like this. If you get a 9, curving will never hurt you. A's are, a 90 and above is guaranteed an A, not an A minus. 80 and above is guaranteed a B, not a B minus. And C, same with C's. The way that I typically I do my curves is fairly simple. I start at 90 and I order your scores from highest to lowest, and I look for a break point. Once I see that there's a reasonable gap, generally around that, once I see there's a reasonable gap, I basically draw a line there and say, okay, all these students who are above this gap but below a 90 get A minuses. Basically, I round for you, in other words. Okay? This is because it's hard for me to distinguish a difference between a tenth of a point, which is what I often have to do because there's often an 89.9. Is there really a significant difference? 0.3 GPA points difference? But if there's a point worth of difference, well, that's an entire point, and that is significant in the grand scheme of things. So I generally, and if you were close to that cutoff point on the other time, that's where the plus comes in, by the way. So that's generally how it works. Generally, what that results is that the cutoff point in general, pretty much consistently throughout the semesters, has been 88.5 for an A minus. Okay. So now with that, I'm going to use the remaining time to kind of show off how awesome the textbook is, because I do think it's an awesome textbook. Okay, but before I move on, any questions? Hopefully everybody's been able to hear me back there. Okay, because the mic's not working. Okay. Again, runestone.academy is the website. Sign up for fall 2023 Rosen. You'll have a list of assignments. I may have to adjust the due dates. These are your solo exercises, by the way, as well as over here, your class exercises. Again, I might have to adjust the due dates for these. Oh yeah, I do have to adjust the due dates on these, but whatever. The point being is that these, again, are the soft due dates. They get kind of automatically imported. And so it'll tell you what I expect you to read, as well as these, what problems to do. As you'll see, if you look at, I don't know if they fixed this. Oh, they fixed it. Okay. It used to be that basically that this subsection had like 1.5 million. This was the sandbox for all the user-contributed questions. And so there were like 40 questions ranging the entire content of the textbook, and the students were like, I don't know how to do this. Am I expected to do all this? No. Like, for instance, if we go over to chapter 6 and look at the exercises, or 6.1 for all these exercises, I'm only going to choose a subset of these. And which subset is it? You'll know it by going to your assignments page and then clicking on it, and it will only show the assignments here. Now, the great way the grading works for here is that you can basically figure out what your points are. For instance, if I do this, print hello, let's see, hello world. Save and run, that's how you run it, and then it will run what's called a unit test to check your output to make sure that it's correct. At that point, right, it still says it's 0, compute score, and then it updates it over here to say you got 5 out of 8 points total out of all the exercises over here. Now, what it does is, now note the warning down here. I'm still going to get emails about this anyway, but this should at least eliminate some of them. Scoring for problems that you self-grade are unofficial. This is basically letting you know what your score is at this point, right? Some problems have to be manually graded. So, once these don't get rolled into the grade book until I run my grader on my end. But this lets you see what would be your grade in the grade book. Does that make sense? Right? It tells you what your grade. So when I do run it, when I run my grader, you'll see this cell. Once I run the grader, this button disappears. But that doesn't mean that you need to stop working on it, that you can't go back and work on it. It just means that you can't compute what the score is anymore. You can still try the problems, you can still check if the problems are correct. And once I run the grader again, it will update that score. Does that make sense? It just disappears after the first time because it doesn't assume that I'm going to go back and rerun the thing. Okay, so all right. So by the way, as you saw, this has this is a fully functioning Python terminal over here, printing hello world. Which again, a lot of you are like, "What's Python? What's a terminal?" Don't worry about that right now. That's lab 1, but I'll talk about it for a bit. And you can also access a scratch pad of material right over here. So if you're on a public computer and don't have access to a web browser, but you feel the itching need to do your homework for some reason, you can write down what you need here, save and run. It's now saved in the cloud, so to speak, so that you can come back when you're at your own computer and copy and paste it. So it supports things even like turtles, which is, again, a paradigm that we'll be using. Don't worry about that you don't understand any of this. I'm just kind of, again, showing off the features of this textbook. So it supports doing some basic graphics as well. So with the last 15 minutes, I suppose then I should talk about what in the world is Python, okay? And what the heck is a programming language? Well, a programming language is, you see these things? You see this thing? This is a rock we zapped with lightning until we tricked it into thinking, okay? It's not got a brain. It just does ones and zeros, okay? And that's all it understands. Everything at the end of the day a computer understands is in terms of ones and zeros. How it does that is the scope of other classes. But that's really all it understands. It doesn't even actually understand those things. It understands electrical symbols that are encoded as ones and zeros. So now, I don't know about you, but I cannot communicate in electrical signals or ones and zeros. In fact, that's the vast majority of humanity right there, I'm sure. So nobody does that. even in the early days, that was torture. So what we did instead is that we created a basic language called assembly language to build some programs, to assemble some basic programs. But that's fairly limited. You had to keep a lot of mental work about where you were in your instructions, what was being kept stored where, and what point of memory. It's a lot of overhead. Eventually, we created what are called high-level languages, which look a lot more like English, a lot more readable by humans, a lot more readable. Python's great because it's what we call an interpreted language, and it does a lot for us. So when you download Python, it will come prepackaged with a program called idle. Now, I will be using this tool for programming most of the semester. I'll eventually switch over to what I prefer, which is VS Code. You're allowed to use whatever tool to program in that you want. If you want to use PyCharm, you're more than welcome to use PyCharm. If you want to use VS Code, you're more than welcome to use VS Code. If you want to use Emacs or Vim, more power to you. I probably don't have to worry about you in this class. Because those things have a learning curve with the slope of Niagara Falls, so to speak. So if you know how to use, in other words, if you know how to learn, one of those programs already, you kind of are set. But the reason I use this one at the beginning is that it's minimalistic. It doesn't, it allows you to focus on what you're doing in terms of programming fairly easily. It's and it's one less thing to install. I only have to tell you to install one thing. You don't need to install multiple things. And it works. It works. So I'll be using idle for the vast majority of the semester for this. Your first assignment in lab is to get Python installed on your computer, which is you download from python.org. I have instructions on how to do that on here. In fact, I've got most of the course unorganized for you under modules. We're currently in Module 1, and you'll see the way that I've got the course set up is that every week kind of corresponds to a module. I'll have due dates for these things. Again, I have to go through and adjust the due dates because they got auto-imported. I have to adjust these due dates from the spring semester. Oh well. But the idea here is that I'll tell you what's going on each lecture. I'll have some videos for you to watch. This will correspond to your lab. So if you didn't go to your lab, watch this, then it's extra important that you watch this video. It goes over how to install Python. If you want to know how to configure idle, I go a bit about that in the next settings. And then your description of the lab over here. Similarly for Module 2, I have an overview, and then generally I put the stuff straight in the overview. A playlist where, now these videos, they go over each section of the textbook. So you can think of them as, so you can read the textbook, or you can watch my videos, or you can use both of them. But the idea here is that you will, is that you want to watch these videos to be prepared for the exercises in class, because that way I don't have to, that way I can teach it as the second exposure rather than the first exposure. That works a lot better for student learning. Okay? But the modules give you a guide of what to do. Okay? So going back, now there's a lot of other programming languages out there. Most computer science 1 classes teach one of two languages. They do Python or they do Java. Java is great. I love Java. But it's scary for your first time using. This is how, so the first program that people write to confirm that things are working on your computer, it's called Hello World. Now, this is the way that a Hello World looks in Java. This is not Python. This is Java. This is for a different class. Public class hello, curly brace, end curly brace. Okay, and then I need to do public static void main, just rolls right off the tongue at this point. String args. Oh, another curly brace. Okay, And now I can start programming. At that point, you have to have just got it memorized at this point, so you know. And then system.out.println, which calls the system library to get the out stream and tells to print out something in the out stream. So this is Java. Now, the reason it's shaped like this is because it's a C-based language. It's based off a language from the 70s called C. C is also great, but boy, does C make you work for everything. It really does. Like, it is a pain to work in C a lot of the time. Java is a lot less of a pain to work in C. It also has a lot of protections that are very useful as you program later that Python doesn't have. But for teaching, it's not really, I mean, I have to tell you, here's the magic words. Ignore the magic words. You're not going to understand them until the end of the semester. Even if you, maybe, possibly, you might not understand it at the end of the semester. Depends on what we teach. And this is so you have to memorize these magic phrases and the curly braces to know what and then this is the only relevant line. Python's like, nah, let's get this all out of the way. What's going on there? Okay. Print. Hello. Sorry. World. I don't know why it's just acting up there. That was just my computer being funky, not idle. Save it. Let's go ahead and save it on the desktop. Hello.py. Give it a name. Doesn't matter what it is. And now we wrote our first Python script. Now, it is a script, this program. What it is that you've got a program. When you install Python, you install a program called the Python interpreter on your program. And what it does is the Python interpreter is built for your computer. And what it does is that it takes a Python code and it reads you read your script line by line like it's an actor and translates it into something that your computer can understand, like an interpreter at the UN. Okay? So here, it translates it into computer code, which tells it to print out hello world. I run the program by hitting F5 or by going over here, hitting run module, and it comes out on this other window, hello world, over here. And that's it. This is what we called so this over here is your output. It's technically what we call a REPL. REPL. It stands for read, evaluate, print, loop. In other words, read what the user put in, evaluate the expression, print out the result, loop. Keep doing it. This just simply dumps all the lines in one at a time rather than you having to type it out one at a time over here. So the most common mistake I see for lab, which is very easily corrected, is that I have a lot of students who will do their entire program in the REPL, and they'll save it, and then when they try to run it again, you can't because it's got all this other stuff in here. This is basically the way you directly talk to the Python interpreter, if you want to directly talk with it. Now, how is this useful? Well, suppose you want to do something very quick, like generate a bunch of random numbers to copy paste into something else, or if you just want to use Python as like a really strong calculator, like 3 to the 8th power. You can do that right here. Very useful. Over here, or if you want to see, or if you're trying to write something, a complicated expression, right? You've seen those math problems on Facebook or Instagram or some other social media that you're on that say, oh, what's the answer to this? Only 10% of people will get this, and it's some really ambiguous statement. And people will argue about PEMDAS. And the answer is, it's whatever my bloody computer says it is. And at that point, everything else is, based off of, the fact that you've expressed it ambiguously. So the idea here is that, like, if you want to check how your statement's going to be evaluated based on the parentheses that you put in, this is a useful way to check that, just kind of on the fly without having to run your entire program. It's a very useful tool to have. But for the most part, a lot of your programming, what that will be doing is that you'll be typing your entire program here, running it and testing it, and you'll get your output here. So what are we going to do on Thursday? Do I expect you to know how to program or even have Python installed? No. What we're going to be doing on Thursday is I'm going to be basically doing my best to make coding a lot less scary on Thursday. We have a bunch of exercises with fully written out programs. And what we'll do in the class is that we're going to go through them and we're going to basically see, oh, this program goes to this output. This program goes to this output. It's not nearly as hard as it seems. All right, so I think that is about it for the day. So I will upload this on YouTube as soon as I can. If you have questions or need to speak with me, feel free to come down.